Okay, let's pray together. Oh, Jesus, I love talking about your words, and I pray that you're glorified in this conversation. I pray that all of us, we're able to just internalize what you're saying and why you said what you said, and that this can truly shape our lives to become more and more like you. Thank you for everybody who's here. I just pray that your spirit is speaking through us to each other, and may we be your tangible presence to one another as we have this conversation. And we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Oh. Well, I have to tell you, thank you. You know, there's like 4 or 5 more people on the screen now than there was when I came last time. So thank you all for giving me a second chance. This is okay. They thought it was Jim, but that's okay.
Only because he wasn't paying attention.
Fair. That's probably true. Well, you know, last time we talked about some really hard stuff, and so you know, I was worried. I told Jim, I said, "Man, we got into the weeds. I hope it was okay." And then he said, "Oh, great. Well, you know, this time you guys talked about divorce and stuff last week," and I was like, "Woo!" I was glad I didn't have that one. I'd love to know what were some of the highlights of the discussion last week. Crickets.
No,
Not including the one we spoke about earlier.
go ahead.
Not including the hand stuff. No, John's pure now. He's holy.
We said that,
Purged.
of course, in the beginning, it was what God joined, let no man put asunder. And that was what would be the best thing. But Jesus still allowed them an out. Other than
Okay.
she burned my eggs this morning.
So you talked about, did you guys talk about Shammai and Hillel? The two Jewish scholars who, no, okay, then never mind.
No, go there. Please enlighten us.
Oh no, there were just two main lines of thought in Jesus' day. There were 2 dead rabbis, Shammai and Hillel. And one of them was very liberal and one of them was very conservative when it comes, and I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I just lost which one was which. But and so Jesus almost always sided when he taught with the more liberal one. And this is not political liberal. Okay, this is just like, you know, I should come up with a different word because everybody, that has so many different connotations. But he always sided with the one who was more about grace, more about love and things like that. But on divorce, he flipped it because he sided with the more conservative one, and it was a big shock because it was one of those where you never knew where Jesus stood by others. You always had to listen to him, and so yeah, he did, and even Paul, he actually gave another out. Did you guys talk about that?
No, we spoke about like the heart matter, the issues, you know, the intentions of the heart, how Jesus raised the bar with the whole adultery and lusting, and if you just thought about it, you did it. And you know, he asked the guys, you know, how do you guys feel about that? And you know, we need God in order to be able to get on that level that he wants us on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Apostle Paul, it was in 1 Corinthians 7. He actually says that if you're a believer and your unbelieving spouse leaves you, that you can let them go, you know, and so he actually even extended it farther. So, okay. I think that actually is pretty good. I wanted to ask you, before we dive into these pictures that Jesus talks about with oaths and the other things and divorce, what do you think Jesus is trying to do with the Sermon on the Mount? What is he? I mean, is he trying to give us a bunch of new laws? Is that the purpose of this sermon?
At one point, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So I don't think he's giving us new laws. I think he's just reiterating what was already said.
Connie, your voice is really deep. Are you feeling okay?
No. never there.
It took me a minute to find out who was talking. Yeah, I mean, so that's what we talked about last time I was here, that Jesus came to fulfill the law. But you're about to see, divorce, oaths, and I'm like, I only studied a lot, murder and adultery and all these different things. Is Jesus adding new laws? Oh, go ahead.
Apologize. I think a significant portion of what's being conveyed is the truth that it's a matter of the heart as much, if not more, than just the action. What was your motive behind what you did? And because God is concerned as much, if not more, with the character of our heart as he is with our physical stumble or our error along the way.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like he was trying to shake them up a little bit and take them out of the mindset of, if I keep these 10 commandments, I'm okay.
Yeah, and in the culture and custom, wasn't it true that there were a lot of ways to manipulate the existing laws so that you could bend them considerably without fracturing them, and then not be subject to the guilt of the law? And Jesus is saying, bend it all you want, but once you started down that path, you had shattered it. So whether or not you technically crossed a line, it's a matter of your heart, and that is the core of it.
That's good. Anybody else? I'm sorry, I missed something, I think. Was somebody talking? Because everybody froze for a second, and now I didn't hear anything. Okay. Well, let me ask you this, just to kind of put it in perspective again, because remember the Beatitudes, that's how Jesus started, and he was kind of reframing the kingdom, that in the kingdom, blessed are the, and everything he basically says from that point on are things that nobody would have ever considered blessed. Blessed are the meek. What? Blessed are the poor. No. Blessed are the, those grieving. Blessed are, and he was really creating this picture of the kingdom is full of people who nobody thought the kingdom would ever be full of. I mean, the poor, they're not blessed. The poor, they're judged by God in their mind. And so Jesus comes across saying, nope, the poor are blessed. And, the peacemakers and the persecuted. What? The persecuted are blessed. And so he's reframing the kingdom. And then right after the Beatitudes, he says that you are salt and light. And he starts talking about the kingdom and like who the citizens of the kingdom are so different than the citizens of the world. And then right after that, he talks about the fulfillment of the law being himself, that the law is not bad, the law is good, but the law was to the Jewish people. And Jesus says, everything that the law, everything the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible was pointing to is fulfilled in me, Jesus. And now, fulfilled, and I don't know if you remember, we talked about fulfilled is the same word. It means like, it's like a debt paid. Like, it's not that it was bad. When you pay off that last payment of the car loan, the car is still yours. The car is beautiful, but you don't owe it anymore. And so that's why we don't have to keep all those 618 laws. And that's why Debbie's son can be such a great tattoo artist. He couldn't do that in the Hebrew Bible, but he can now because the law is complete and fulfilled in Jesus. And so, and I hope you don't mind me summarizing it, because sometimes it helps me to have some perspective again. And after he talks about who he is, sorry, I zipped across. He starts talking about, I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees, this is 5:20, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. And then it's like, and here's some examples, because the Pharisees were the best law keepers there were, but they didn't have heart. They were just really good law abiders. And so he starts saying, you heard it said that don't murder. I say, if you're even angry with a brother or sister, or you call somebody a fool in anger, that that it's worse, you know, and that if you offer, and I love this one because we don't think about the offering a gift at the altar, but do you know what the gift at the altar was? We think putting a check and setting it on the steps of the altar and going home. This is such a ludicrous statement. What was the gift that you sacrificed on an altar in Jesus' day?
An animal?
It was an animal. So leave the dead animal on the side of the temple and go somewhere, you know, for a couple of days, make it right and come back. I mean, that's just ludicrous, but it's like the heart matters this much. And then adultery. You guys did you talk about the adultery and divorce together last week?
Yeah.
The adultery one is probably one of the ones that speak to my heart the most, because what Jesus is saying, you know, you said don't commit adultery, but I say everybody who looks at a woman and lusts has committed adultery. Do you know what Jesus just did right there? He just said, you're an adulterer, and you're an adulterer, and you're an adulterer. And the person goes, no, I've never committed adultery, but you're an adulterer. And so he basically just called every man in that crowd an adulterer.
Well, we also said that women can be too, because you look at that hunky guy in the, you know, in the sexy bathing suit walking down the beach, and you go, wow.
As I recall, Vicki, that was you that said that.
It was me that said it.
So all the men and you, Vicki, we're all. but what I love is that Jesus basically is speaking to these people. He's saying, you're all adulterers. Come follow me. You're welcome. It's like, stop fooling yourselves. You are not, you know, you could, the Pharisees can't even measure up to my standard, Jesus is saying. Follow me anyway. I don't know why, but when it's like, when Jesus calls me an adulterer and then welcomes me into his family, it's like, oh, like everybody who's messed up gets to come. Everybody who doesn't have it together, everybody who sins, we're invited in. There is so much freedom for me in that. Oh my goodness. And then you guys talked about divorce, and I find it you know, that one my mom got divorced when I was a teenager in 11th grade, and we were in a church, and she basically was asked to leave the church. It was so awful. And that one really, that one was a tough one for me for a long time. And I'm very grateful for grace, like what you guys said. And so my original question, what is Jesus trying to do with the Sermon on the Mount? And I think you said it, John. He's trying to create a new ethic or a new kind of people. This is the new way of life.
And he's giving the scripture a deeper meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's like, you guys thought it was just show up and you get a point for it just showing up. Like your heart and your mind have to be there too.
Yeah.
Not just your body.
Good?
It's like he was leveling the playing field, putting everybody at the same level.
Yeah. Yeah. And that level is we're all in need of Jesus. I mean, everybody. That it doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter how much you do everything right, and you check all the boxes. The reality is you need Jesus too. And heart and intent matter. Why we do what we do matters just as much as what we do. And yeah, that was something nobody ever could understand. That's before that, nobody, I mean, it was like Pharisees only. So let's read the next section, verses 33 through 37. Anybody willing to read that?
Yeah, I'll read
Okay.
it. Get to it.
I heard 3 people say yes, and I saw John, you raise your hand. So John, you're here, you're ready to go. Why don't you read?
Again,
And what
you
version
have
are you in?
heard. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn." But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven or for its throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
What version was that?
ESV.
Okay. Okay. What do you think Jesus is trying to say here?
On his perfect world, you don't need oaths.
Mm.
If it's as it should be. Your yes would just be your yes. If you say you're going to do something, then you will follow through and do it. But life isn't like that.
How was life?
Well, the devil's running around, so life is not like that.
I think Jesus is also saying, don't put your statement on God's shoulders. If God makes a promise, God keeps his promise. Don't use God to put weight and merit behind your claim of a promise. Either stand up to your promise or don't, but don't use God. Don't abuse God.
What do you think was going on that he would have to say this? I mean,
He knew there was a
Sermon on
lot
the-
of hypocrites.
Okay, but
He knew there was a
specifically,
lot of
like,
hypocrites, and people were trying to be like extra fancy, I guess, with their words and just overdoing it instead of just being simple and yes or no, but manipulating as well.
People could manipulate what they said so that they didn't lie. Like if God wills it, it will happen. And instead of saying, I'll do this, putting it on God and saying, if God wills, I'll be there tomorrow. Knowing full well you were never going to show up tomorrow.
Ooh, that's true.
Yeah, I think there was a difference between a promise and a vow. The promise was, I'll do what I'm going to say. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. And a vow was, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, and then this will happen. Or I'll get this benefit, or you'll get this benefit. Things will happen because of this vow.
well, then let's apply this to real life, like today. What instances could Jesus be talking to us about in this one passage?
Making promises we can't keep,
Okay, making promises you can't keep.
not being true to ourselves and other people.
Making conditional promises to God. If you'll do this for me, God, then I will never miss church again, or I'll be better, or do something, conditional promises.
We've heard of the white lie, right? Or and what's Jesus say? Well, it's a white lie. It's a lie for a good purpose. It's a lie that was meant to help somebody. It makes me say, my wife comes out and says, "Does this outfit look nice?" And you go, "Oh, I hate that question." Of course it does. That's the always answer, right? Of course it does. But what is this? Does this passage speak to that? Pinky swears, pinky promises, versus when you're with your kids, or contracts that are worded a little bit loosey-goosey so that you can get away with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is this speaking to those things?
Yeah, and if he's speaking towards obviously his people, he wants us to be people of integrity and to be witnesses with good testimony and credibility.
How you doing on this one? You don't have to answer out loud, but
much better than before.
Oh, good. I'm an exaggerator. I like making people laugh, and so I read this and I think about the millions of times in my life where the story where the fish was this big, but now it's this big, or you're telling a story but you want to, you want to laugh. And I'm not talking about telling a story where everybody knows, they're just stories, but you're like, oh, this happened to me yesterday. And you exaggerate. Was Jesus was he speaking to me? Does this have to do with exaggerating?
Possibly, if it's manipulating the way the person takes it.
Right. Manipulation. Yeah,
But
I think
exaggeration isn't really like an oath that, God, I'm going to do this. Or, with your making a deal with somebody else, and I swear by God, I'll pay my fair share, or whatever your oath is. I don't think an exaggerated fish story, although it's not the truth, is really an oath.
Okay, so do you think what Jesus is saying here is it's less about true versus false or lying and more about oaths? Or do you think it's about honesty and integrity too?
I think it's definitely about honesty and integrity, because if we were living in God's world as he meant it to be, we would all be honest. We wouldn't have to make oaths. We would just do what we said we were going to do without making an oath.
Okay.
Well,
What about, go ahead.
There's a question of why you would need to make a vow or an oath. Why would that be important?
Why would it be important for most people? Well, think about a contract. Why do we have contracts now? Why don't we just shake hands and buy the building from somebody else? We don't. It's a legal contract. Why do we do that?
Make sure everything's on the up and up and that nobody's going to get cheated.
Clear understandings, mutual agreements of what expectations should be on both sides.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's important, the expectations and accountability. If I break my side of the covenant or the agreement, the contract, then we can go to a third party, the court, and ask them to help. And they go, oh, you promised this, you're not upholding your end of the bargain. And they force you to, because in our society, if we don't have that, then so much of our society breaks down. I mean, if I say, thank you for the $200,000, but no, I'm not giving you the house. Obviously that would be society wouldn't go.
Yeah, it puts more weight on the promise.
Mm-hmm. And so what does Jesus say? Thank you, Debbie. That's actually a really good way of saying it. What is Jesus saying about the weight of the promise?
Make a promise unless you need it, or unless you mean it.
Right. Every yes we say, every no we say should have the same weight that a contract does. That, I mean it that strongly. I don't know if Jim ever talks about writers. And if so, there's a commentary that he and I both read a lot of for this conversation, and it's by a guy named Scott McKnight. Scott McKnight believes all of these are very literal. Okay. And so, so already you've said things that he would disagree with when it comes to like the heart of the matter versus what Jesus is saying. So Jesus said, I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. This is NIV, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by earth, or by Jerusalem. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair black or white. All you need to say is a simple yes and no. And Scott McKnight said that if you are subpoenaed to go to court and they ask you to put your hand on that Bible, that you are supposed to say, I am sorry, as a follower of Jesus, I can't swear. My yes will be yes. My no will be no. I will be honest. Respond to that.
I swear on the Bible that that's true.
Well, I mean, Jesus said, I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, not by heaven, God's throne, or the earth, or Jerusalem, or this, how would you justify that?
Well, could we also look at it as the receiver not expecting or needing that?
Flesh that out. I don't know what that means.
Well, with other believers, should we require a contract? Should we require a vow? Should we require collateral? Or should we just require your word and accept it?
If you're selling your house to somebody else in the church, do you want a written contract? I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I want to go to jail for, contempt of court either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is Jesus, the applications that Jesus is making in these little short examples, are they, above time and situation that you obey the letter of what Jesus says, or are these principles that he's sharing that we have to decide in every single culture, how do I apply that? Scott McKnight would say, no, Jesus said, don't take oaths, don't take oaths. Most commentaries would say, in that culture, that's fair. In our culture, that's impossible. But the principle is make your yes, yes, your no, no. I promise you this, when Scott McKnight bought his house, he signed a contract. I promise you. So do you think it has more to do with trying to figure out what Jesus is saying and then trying to figure out how we apply that in our culture? Or do you just take it for the letter? It's a tough question.
I think it's how we apply it to our own personal lives.
So what's the danger in that? Because this is, I think, really important on all of these, is there is a danger in what you just said, Vicki. Just like there's a danger taking it for the letter, because honestly, what would our testimony be if we stood in court and said, I will not swear that I saw, the testimony would be, he's a weirdo and we can't trust him.
And plus you get contempt of court.
And then there's that. So what's the danger of saying, here's the principle and here's how we apply it in our own culture? Do you see one?
I would think a truthful yes would be fine in any culture, but go for it. I know you're looking for something.
Well, somebody else was talking. What'd you say?
I said in our culture, not everybody has the same belief system or the same integrity or the honesty. And unfortunately, we can't just take anything and everything at face value because of the way society is.
Or our culture has a different definition of right and wrong than necessarily the Bible does. So if we go try to fit it into our culture, then you may end up just going totally off the path.
Yeah. And obviously, that's a couple of steps to do that, Robin, but you're exactly right. Our culture, if we're looking at our culture, because that's the lens we're all in. I mean, we look at things, and what was right, what was wrong 30 years ago is right now. Nobody even cares. And good or bad. I mean, sometimes it's true, because what was wrong 30 years ago, you're like, why is going to a movie per se wrong? Now nobody cares about that, but maybe it's the kind of movie or what you do, and I'm just thinking my upbringing, because that was, don't go to the movie house. And I'm like, movie house? There's no houses that have, anyway. But I think that the principles that we can say Jesus is teaching, we have to make sure that that's actually the principle that he was teaching, because, we could say, oh, it's oaths in this situation, or adultery, it's all about looking. So I can think Or I can look at pornography as long as I'm not thinking what he's saying. And so we can take the principles and go, but the reality is Jesus is saying that, with the divorce, that marriage is holy. It was intended forever, and that the woman and the man are incredibly valuable. That relationship. And so any sexual deviance, which is so common in our world, all of it is bad. And in oaths, even the slightest hint of dishonesty is wrong. I think that's the importance of saying it's a principle, is just make sure it's the principle. Because we can go, oh, but white lies are okay. He's talking about oaths. He's not talking about white lies. Or, hey, listen, if the contract says this, it doesn't matter what the intent was. We can do what we want because that's what it says. And I think Jesus would say, no.
So what's the defining line, if there is one, between an oath and letting your word stand upon its yes or no? Because if I say yes, if I make a promise, have I made an oath? Are those two distinctly different things?
I'm going to let somebody else talk. That's a good one.
I was thinking the same thing. So I was trying to figure out, like, are we separating the two, or are they really one and all, meaning one supersedes the other? So like if you say yes in the midst of an oath, or you say yes to a question, honesty is just on the table. If you're being honest, you're being honest. If you make a crooked contract, just because you both agree to it doesn't make it a good contract. So I don't know. I think it has a lot to do with the intentions and the person's individual intentions. So if you say yes as a way to, sometimes you can say yes just to manipulate someone to thinking you're going to do something and you're not going to do it. So I don't know. I from the verse that we're talking about, I just see it a little simple as let your yes be yes and your no be no, and don't use any additional maneuvers or manipulation ways to get around making people believe more than they should or make it more than it is.
Yeah, the example almost was like they were invoking either God or some power or something to give it weight, is what it sounded like.
Let me ask you this. This might answer the question. What motivates people to do that? What motivates people to say, no, I really promise, or I promise on my mother's grave? How many times have I heard that? And you're like, what the heck does that mean? And I promise, and for them, they would say, I promise on Jerusalem. I promise on the temple. I promise on God's himself. Why do you think people did that? What was their motivation?
I think they were just trying to convince the other person that they really meant what they were saying.
Right. You don't normally have to believe me because, I might exaggerate or whatever, but I mean, on this one, I'm telling you the truth.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, why did you even have to do that? But let me go to one more question. There is a law that Jesus gave that is bigger, that is higher than this law, that this law fits under another law. Do you remember what that law is?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay, even that law is under another law that Jesus gave. He said, I give you a new command. Do you remember what that is? It's John 13:34. If you want to look, but I'll tell you what it is. So
love thy neighbor as I have loved you.
Boom. Love others as I have loved you. Now, when Jesus was given the Sermon on the Mount, he hadn't died for anybody yet. They had no idea the kind of love that he was capable of. And so he didn't say that command until the end of his ministry. But we, looking back, know that every law in the scriptures is summarized under the one, we call it the golden rule, love God, love your neighbor. And I think it was Andy Stanley calls it the platinum rule, love as I loved you. And so let me ask you, going back to oaths and promises, where Jesus in every single one of these is hitting you're loving yourself more than you're loving somebody else. And so oaths and I mean, when Jesus says all you need to say is a simple yes and no, how is that loving others sacrificially when you just say yes or no? Because I think it's that question in every one of these. You go, okay, so how is this following Jesus' ultimate command to love as he loved? And what is the danger? I mean, where do you put yourself at risk when you just say yes or no? Is there a risk by being completely honest?
There's a risk that people might trust you. I mean, if you're a trustworthy person, if every time you say yes or no, you truly mean it and you live it out, then you become a trustworthy person.
Sure, but so why do we lie?
To protect ourselves.
Why do you lie?
People
Well, it's
lie.
the whole asking your wife, or telling your wife, no, you don't look fat in that. Of course you're lying, but
It's
you're lying to
selfish.
protect her feelings.
And
Be
keep
selfish.
Peace.
Be selfish at times.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we only lie because we get some benefit out of it. I mean, nobody lies at their own detriment. We tell the truth at our own detriment often. And so Jesus is saying it's worth it, right? I mean, it's worth being honest, even if it's going to cause you pain. But if I'm honest, I'm going to lose the deal. If I'm honest and the contract that I signed, and if I go by the intent of that, or if I tell somebody, no, all of my windows in my house are actually broken, but unless the inspector finds that, I'm not going to say anything. That the lie benefits me, but the truth benefits you at my cost. That's hard. This stuff's, I mean, like, oh. So let's read the next section, because now Jesus is about to give like 3 or 4 different little, even smaller pictures. Would somebody be willing to read verse 38 through 42?
Sure.
Go ahead.
You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you.
What is Jesus saying here?
You kind of started with this at the beginning, that, at one time somebody put your son's eye out, you would just go kill him. So this was kind of limiting that punishment should meet the crime.
Is it?
To a certain extent.
Is it limiting? Because it almost looks like if you're blessing somebody who hurts you. I mean, it's even more than limiting the crime. You're saying, okay, not only can you take everything you just were going to take, but I'm going to give you more. I mean, it even seems like, yeah, it's exactly what you said, Vicki, times 10. It's like, oh my goodness.
Oh, I was talking about the beginning where it said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I wasn't talking about turn the other cheek or give him my coat.
Okay. I think those are just examples of the first, he says, you've heard it said eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. I tell you, resist an evil person, and here's how. Do not resist an evil person, I'm sorry, and here's how. Every time somebody takes something from you, give them more. Every time they hurt you, allow them to hurt you more. This is crazy talk.
It's a lot of humbleness and a lot of forgiveness.
Selfless. Mercy, selflessness, all that good stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
The opposite of what we're taught to do when growing up, kind of.
Boy.
For
sure.
Don't let the bully beat you up. This was like, let the bully beat you up all day, every day.
Yeah, I told my daughter once, you better never hit somebody first, but you always be the last. You're the last hit, meaning that you won. I know. I'm sorry, Debbie. It was a long time ago, and I have girls who would never hurt a fly. They run from roaches. But so how does this apply to us today?
Well, it's a definition of love, um, to an extent. Whatever you believe your rights are, whatever you believe is just, or a consequence that you have the right to take on someone else in response to something that happens to you, I'm asking you, give it up and put them and their relationship with me above your needs, your desires, and your wants. I remember asking a group of teens once, define love. And one of the young ladies raised her hand and she said, when the needs of others become more important than our own. And 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 you know, I love the conclusion, the two words, so that. I think Jesus is saying this because he knows his people are going to be persecuted. He knows that they're going to face consequences, and he wants everyone to be able to give a demonstration of love that would evoke somebody to say, I want to know why. I want to know why you would endure this. What is it about you that would cause you to endure this, so that they can learn about the true nature of Christ's love? I think.
I think. Let's look at each one of these. I want to ask you, who does this? If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. In that culture, who would you imagine would slap another person on the cheek?
Probably the religious teachers.
Okay, somebody who is an authority. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I was just
Is that what
going
you're
to say
gonna say?
someone in authority over someone else. Yeah.
Okay, and why would you slap them? It would be to put them in their place, probably. And so somebody embarrasses you in that culture, and Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Are they going to slap that cheek? There's a good chance they won't, because they've just been humbled. You know, your authority. Okay, you're an authority, and you've just changed the relationship because they were in control when they slapped you. But the moment you are loving back to them, you have just taken control of the situation, and you said, I actually have, I'm the master, right, of this moment, and I am giving it freely to you. Okay. If somebody sues you, who sues somebody else in that culture? It's probably similar to today. And they
Business
take your,
people?
sure, yeah, absolutely. Business people, people in the culture around you, probably a fellow Jew would be the suer, because a Roman would just take. And he sues you and takes your shirt. And Jesus says hand over, and the actual word is tunic as well. Do you know what else you wore besides a shirt and a tunic? Nothing. If somebody sued you and took your shirt, are they going to take your underwear too? Even if you offered it? Probably not. But once again, you're doing the exact same thing. You're saying, you've taken, and I can't do anything about that. But even what I have, I'm going to freely give to you, even as little and meager as it is. Let's talk about the next one. Go ahead.
Wait, so are you saying that these verses are literal, or more
I think Jesus is telling a story.
Or a little bit of both, or both?
Yeah. No, I think Jesus is telling a story, and but there's a point to where I'm going, I promise. Let's go to the next one. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Who's he talking about there? Because this is actually a situation.
Roman soldiers.
Yeah. John, do you know what the law was?
Sure. So a Roman soldier could approach any Israelite, any Jew, and hand them their pack whatever they were carrying, and the Jew would have an obligation to carry that for 1 mile. And at that point, they could put it down. So there was actually a custom, or I've been taught that there was a custom in that time, that Jewish people would put a marker up approximately 1 mile from where they lived, so that they knew exactly how far they had to carry that pack and when they could put it down with no threat of retaliation under the law and head back home. And Jesus is saying, you know what? The Roman soldier has the right to make you carry their stuff for 1 mile, blow their mind and carry it for 2. Heck, carry it all the way to their destination.
Yeah, man, that's such a big deal because there's a couple of things happening here. You know, the love again. You had no choice about the first mile, but all of a sudden you have an absolute choice, and sacrificial love is what you're offering on the second mile. But let's look at the people who are involved here. The slapper is not going to be a Roman. Usually, it's going to be somebody in authority. So if you're a zealot and you look at the authorities as sellouts, or if you are a widow or a prostitute or a single woman, and the authority does that to you, what they're saying is, I'm above you. And what you're saying is, and even though you're above me, I'm still valuing you. You are still valuable, that I will submit to you. You look at me as nothing, but I'm still going to take the ownership and offer more love because you're valuable. The person who sues you, the person that you're struggling with, you're fighting with, you offer love, you offer sacrifice, and you're telling them they're valuable. But look at the third one. This one's really good. The Roman soldier. They are completely, you hate them. They have been oppressing your people for 150 years at that point. And so when you follow them and you give them the extra mile, you offer that, you are telling the Roman soldier he is valuable, that you are submitting willingly to him or her. I feel like there's something special about Jesus saying that, coming for all nations and all people in this moment that we often miss, because we usually, we put ourselves into this position and we think of somebody slapping us, or we think of a movie where French dude slaps at somebody else, and the suing, we see that, and the going 1 mile and going 2. But the reality is, in most of these relationships, it's not like this. It's not two equals. It's a superior and somebody who is being humbled. And Jesus is saying, and not only have you just been humbled, I want you to humble yourself further in love, because they're valuable and because they matter, and because that's what I'm going to do on the cross. And all of a sudden we see Jesus saying, treat Roman soldiers as human beings. And you think about us and you go, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, who were the Jewish people? Who were God's people in their mind? They were. And all of a sudden, Jesus is saying, and God loves them too. And I think this is a real big, mental turnaround. It was a paradigm shift for them.
But it also kind of, you tell me, connects with Proverbs 25:21, where they speak about feed your enemy. I have it over here. It says, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. And then the next verse says, in doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Do you think, because when you were talking about this and we were talking about, my mind goes to that verse. Do you see any connection there?
I'll be honest, I see less connection there and more connection to a few verses earlier when Jesus said, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. I think what he's telling in this passage, this eye for an eye passage, is he's saying, and here's what it looks like to be light and salt. It's about submitting, even to those who hate you, even to those you hate naturally, even to those who are in authority and they abuse their authority. you are salt and light. So I don't think this is about like, get them,
But
they're going to do something stupid, make them feel like they're doing something stupid. I think it's more of what's going on? Who does this?
but it's also opening a door for them to see something or someone they're not familiar with. God's love, God's light.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And I'm pretty sure, because we're not going to go to it. This is where you're going to start next week. Is the next section is love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. I mean, Jesus you can see he starts with salt and light, and then he starts talking about your ethic for the purpose of loving others, and then boom, he gets to love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. That's the Roman soldier he's just talking about.
And I'm not even sure it's always about the other person. Oftentimes it's about us, and it's about transforming us within. And,
Good word.
it has little to do with them and a lot to do with us and aligning us with the Lord.
Yeah, Debbie, that's a good word. I never want to think that God tells us to love others just because he cares more about them than us. In fact, he wants to do in them what he's doing in us. He wants to transform and regenerate us to be people who are like him, and them to be people like him. So yeah, good word. What do you think about all this stuff? Is this hard?
It's not easy. It's really not easy to truly have a heart to live this way.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to read. Maybe
Yeah.
not so much to live out.
Let me ask you something, and just popcorn. You can all turn on your mics for a second if you're willing to just shoot a couple of words. But Jesus never asked his followers to do anything that he doesn't do himself, right? So how did Jesus live out the characteristics that we've studied so far? And you could just say, oh, he died on the cross. Yeah. Okay. We've talked about that one, but how else did Jesus live this out?
The whole process of even going through getting to the point of the cross, he was spit on, offended. He could have changed his mind. he could have did a lot of things, but he endured all the insults and betrayal. Yeah. He even, the way he dealt with Judas.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Can you think of examples of how Jesus lived out the Sermon on the Mount?
Well, the way he dealt with Zacchaeus and others that were looked at as sinful among the people, but yet he treated them honorably and in a loving way.
The woman at the well.
Yeah, he valued women.
He protected her from the consequences of her actions. And he stood between her and what they were planning to do.
Oh, you're talking about the woman, the woman, John 8, who committed adultery.
Yes.
Who they caught. Yeah, absolutely. That was such an amazing story where he stepped out right in the middle of it. Can you think of anything else?
He was always on the side of the downtrodden or the outcast, healing the lepers that nobody else would touch. And, the people who were worthless in the Pharisees' eyes were the people that he would go to and would congregate with and who would teach.
Did he suffer for that?
Not right then and there, but that was just more salt in the wound for when they were going to try to crucify him.
Sure. But they definitely made his life miserable. There were a couple of times he had to leave Jerusalem just because they were going to kill him.
Even in Nazareth, he wasn't welcome.
Yeah. And that was his family. Nazareth was a small town, and they wanted to kill him because he said, "I'm Messiah."
Healing the Garden of Gethsemane is what John said.
Say that again.
Healing the guard in Gethsemane.
Oh yeah. He healed when they were coming to take him. Peter cut off the guy's ear. He healed it. Then he said, stop it. You know, this has got to happen. This is part of the plan right now. So when I think it's Hebrews or Paul, but I'm pretty sure it's Hebrews, where we have it's Hebrews, a high priest who has suffered, who has been tempted by every temptation we have. We serve a Messiah who, I mean, that's the beauty of the incarnation, God becoming man. He has gone through everything we've gone through. And now his spirit lives in us. So it can transform us to become more and more like this kind of people that, Debbie, like you were talking about. It is about us being transformed. Okay, last question, we're done. I know it's 8:04, so I think I'm 4 minutes over.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay, we have one more question, because I think this is the most important question we could ask of the whole day. And vulnerability is, I realize, on the table, so I understand. But how do you need to change or respond as a result of what we've read today? You don't have to answer out loud, but if you would like to, that'd be great. But
Certainly more slowly.
Good.
I have found that the quickest responses I have are not the most inappropriate, but the least thought through, and usually the most harmful to those around me.
Yeah. Wisdom never comes fast. For sure. When you look at murder/anger, are you angry with anybody? Is there a relationship that has been broken because of anger? Is there a relationship that's just that you haven't, and I'm not asking you to talk, I mean, just think. Is there a relationship in your life that has not been reconciled? Because I would dare say, Jesus would say, maybe it's time to do something about that. Is there, have you hurt somebody? Have you been an authority and taken advantage of that authority in somebody? Is there a sin that you, and I say you, I'm talking to me too, that we need to confess to somebody? Is there a position of authority that we have maybe not abused, but we haven't used that as a position to serve others? Rather, we've done it for ourselves. Are there lies that we're telling? I mean, if we apply what Jesus is saying, holy moly, a lot. But if we do, and we become these kind of people, I believe that's what Jesus says, that when we die to self, we find life. There is freedom and reconciliation on the other side. It's hard going through it, but on the other side, there's freedom and in forgiveness and confession and all that. Pretty practical stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this is a section that's also kind of tough for me when I slice it between my personal life and my professional life. Some of the people on here may know I write contracts and manage vendors for a living. So it is my responsibility to the company that I represent to hold others accountable to their oaths, to their promises, to the commitments that they make inside of a contract. And when I read this, I almost read it as, oh, well, they breached the contract and they caused us harm. Let it go. So I struggle with the balance of knowing not how to apply this in my personal life, but when, if ever, does it bleed into how I approach a breach of contract or someone who has harmed the company that I'm paid to represent, and do I turn the company I represent's cheek and let them slap it again? I don't know the answer to that sitting here.
Me
And
too.
usually the answer is no. I hold them accountable and I don't let them take advantage of us a second time.
I think this is on the individual level because there's also the concept or the talk of make sure that you submit to the authority of those appointed over you.
That's good, Doc.
As well as your commitment to your company and the integrity to maintain. So I go through that. I manage a dealership's internet and marketing department. I just started a new project doing that, and I told God, I said, I want to really handle this a lot better than in the past, without as minimal confrontation and, not losing communion with the Lord. I want to deal with them, even if they're not believers. I want to deal with them in a similar way. And it's a dealership in New York, and I'm doing it remotely. It's a Cadillac dealership, and there's a lot of personalities there, a lot of guys that have been in the industry a long time. So they're very difficult. They're very confrontational. And it's like I'm getting slapped in the cheek all day long. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I have a third-party vendor that just comes out of left field. And I know that he's not being truly honest about certain things. And I tell the general manager, the truth, because I'm supposed to. And he's, I have to give my honest opinion and also facts or whatever it is. But anyway, I got to the point where he was starting to get me upset. And that was something that I've been praying to God about a lot, is to be slow to anger and put away all anger and frustration as much as possible. And I'm telling you, it's been a challenge. I'm my third weekend, and I had to take breaks. I had to put my head down and be like, God, help me, please. I don't want to lose it. And when I say lose it, I don't mean for me, losing it now compared to years ago is just like me being truly angry. And I don't get angry often anymore. I used to have a short temper, and I used to tell people off and say really not the nicest words to them and insult them. And I came from a very rough business. So I feel like when I get and interact with these people, they're so used to being so rough on the edge that it's like I'm getting some kind of spiritual training or something. I don't know, because I'm getting really tested. But thank God I haven't blown up, and but I do have to consult with God more than ever while I'm doing it. So yeah, that's what I go through.
It's obvious that none of us have arrived. This is a lifelong journey of trying to figure out how to apply all these commands or all these examples that Jesus gives. And sometimes he uses hyperbole. I mean, I don't really think Jesus ever wants people to cut off their hands. Lord, I was a teenager in America. I should have plucked out all my eyes, when I was younger. And so it's tough. He says no oaths, but the reality is that Paul makes an oath. He appeals to God as his witness several times in his letters. That's the word. The words, that's an oath. God makes oaths to people. Abraham made an oath to God. I will be with you always, is what, there are promises. And so you go, we have to wrestle with all of this. And I think that's good. That's good. Thank you so much for all the talking. You guys are fun. I wish so badly we were in a room together. I think that it would just be even better. COVID will have a vaccine one day. Can't wait.
Oh, I hope so.
I know. Any final words before we close? All right. Well, John prayed. Anybody else willing to close us out in prayer? I will never call on anybody. I never do that, but I want to give you an opportunity.
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we could spend in your word this evening, not just reading it, but studying it and trying to truly understand what you would have for us to know. We praise you and thank you for your love for us, that we should love others as you have loved us. Keep us safe and help us to return next week to learn more for you. I asked all this in Jesus' most precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
week.
You guys
God
have a
bless
good
you guys.
Take care.
night too.
Good night to one and all.
Bye.
Bye.